Imagine waking up tomorrow morning in a world without money. Not a world of poverty, not a world of collapse, just a world where money as a concept does not exist. You are hungry, you need food, you go to the farmer down the road. He has grain, he has vegetables, he has everything you need, but he does not want your thanks. He does not want your promises. He wants something in return, something you have, something he needs. And if you have nothing he needs, you do not eat. This is the world that existed for most of human history, a world of barter. The earliest form of money existed only as a concept through the practice of bartering. In a barter system, people exchange goods and services directly without the medium of money. The barter system is as old as human civilization itself, perhaps older. It likely dates back tens of thousands of years, perhaps even to the dawn of modern humans. It made sense in small communities. In a village of 100 people where everyone knew everyone, you could trade almost anything for almost anything else. I have extra grain, you need grain. You have iron tools, I need iron tools. We trade, simple, elegant, and it worked. Until it didn't. The problem with barter is something economists call the double coincidence of wants. For barter to work, you need to find someone who has exactly what you need and wants exactly what you have. At the same time, in the same place. As communities grew larger, as people began to specialize in what they did, this became harder and harder to achieve. A musician cannot eat music. A painter cannot trade paintings for bread if the baker does not want a painting. The system was breaking down. Human beings needed something that everyone would accept. Something that could represent value without having value in itself. Something that could be saved, divided, and exchanged at any time, with any person, for any good or service. Something like money. But the road from barter to the paper currency in your pocket today was not a straight line. It was one of the longest, strangest, most dramatic journeys in human history. And it began with something you might not expect. A shell. Before coins, before paper, before banks, there was commodity money. Commodity money is the use of an object that has real, practical value as a medium of exchange. Salt, grain, livestock, animal pelts, spices. These things had value because people needed them. And because they had value, people were willing to accept them in exchange for other things. Think about salt for a moment. Salt was one of the most valuable commodities in the ancient world. Before refrigeration, salt was the only reliable way to preserve food. It kept meat from rotting. It kept fish edible through the winter. Without salt, people starved. And so salt became money. The Roman Empire paid its soldiers partly in salt. The Latin word for salt is sal. The English word salary comes from it. We still say someone is worth their salt, and now you know why. But commodity money had serious problems. It was heavy. Grain is difficult to carry in large quantities. Livestock cannot be divided. You cannot give someone half a cow in change. It was perishable. Grain rots, meat spoils, and it was not standardized. How much grain equals one cow? How many fish equal a pair of sandals? Who decides? Every transaction required negotiation. Humanity needed something better, and they found it on the beach. The use of cowrie shells as currency emerged around 2000 to 1000 BCE. These shells were valued for their durability, uniqueness, and aesthetic appeal, making them ideal for use as currency. The cowrie shell, a small glossy oval shell found in the Indian and Pacific Oceans, became one of the most widely used currencies in human history. It was used in China, in India, across Africa, in the Americas. Why a shell? Because it was durable. A cowrie shell could last for decades without deteriorating. It was portable, small, light, easy to carry. It was recognizable. Anyone who held one knew what it was. And crucially, it was difficult to fake. You cannot manufacture a cowrie shell in your basement. For thousands of years, cowrie shells were money, but cowrie shells had one fatal weakness. They were only available near the ocean. This was not a stable foundation for an economy. Something more reliable was needed. And that something was about to be found in the ground. The most important invention in the history of money did not happen in China or Egypt or Rome. It happened in a small kingdom on the western coast of what is now Turkey, the Kingdom of Lydia. The year is approximately 600 BCE. Metal coins were introduced around 600 BCE in Lydia, an ancient kingdom. The Lydians had a problem and a solution at the same time. Lydia sat at the crossroads of the ancient world, between the civilizations of the East and the emerging powers of the West. Merchants came from everywhere, and every merchant came with a different system of value. How do you trade fairly when everyone measures value differently? The solution came from the ground beneath their feet. Lydia sat on rich deposits of a naturally occurring alloy called electrum, a mixture of gold and silver found in riverbeds and mines. The Lydian king had an idea. Take chunks of electrum, standardize their weight, stamp them with an official seal, a lion's head, the symbol of the Lydian royal house, to guarantee their authenticity. The coin was born. Coins made of precious metals like bronze, silver, and gold became standardized forms of currency, stamped with symbols to denote their value and authenticity. The genius of the coin was not the metal. The genius was the stamp. The stamp meant that you did not have to weigh and test the metal every time you traded. The king's mark guaranteed the content. You trusted the coin because you trusted or feared the authority behind it. This was the moment when the concept of trust became inseparable from the concept of money. Money is not just metal. Money is not just paper. Money is trust. The idea that if I give you this object, this stamped piece of metal, this printed piece of paper, you will give me something real in return. Without trust, money is worthless. With trust, money is everything. The Lydian invention spread rapidly. The Persians adopted it. The Greeks refined it. Alexander the Great spread coinage across the known world as he conquered it. The Romans built an empire partly on the back of a standardized monetary system. For the next 2,000 years, coins dominated the world's economies. But coins had a problem. They were heavy. If you wanted to move large amounts of wealth, to pay for a war, to fund a trading expedition, you needed to move enormous quantities of heavy metal. This was slow. It was dangerous. It was expensive. And then, in a place no one in the Western world was watching yet, someone had a better idea. The year is the 7th century CE. The Tang dynasty rules China. China in this period is the most sophisticated civilization on Earth, the largest, the most populous, with the most complex economy, and that complexity was causing a problem. Merchants who traded across China's vast distances needed to carry enormous quantities of copper coins. The coins were heavy. They were difficult to transport. They were targets for bandits and thieves. Merchants began leaving their coins with trusted agents in one city, receiving a paper receipt in return. When they reached their destination, they would present the receipt to another agent, who would pay them out in coins. This system was called fiat, flying money, because the money seemed to fly from one place to another without physically moving. Paper money emerged as a convenient alternative to metal coins during the Tang dynasty in China around the 9th century. But it was under the Song dynasty in the 11th century that paper money truly came into its own. The Song government took the private receipt system and nationalized it. They created the world's first government-issued paper currency. They called it jiaozi. In all, China experienced over 500 years of early paper money, spanning from the 9th through the 15th century. The jiaozi were printed on specially made paper using multiple colors and complex designs to prevent counterfeiting. They were backed by copper coins held in government reserves. For the first time in history, a piece of paper with no intrinsic value was officially accepted as money. This was a revolution, not just in economics, in human psychology. For thousands of years, people had understood money as something with inherent worth. Metal, shells, salt, things that were valuable in themselves. Now, for the first time, people were being asked to accept something valuable that had no value in itself. A piece of paper. What made it valuable? The promise of the government that issued it. But the Chinese experiment also revealed a danger that would haunt governments for the next 1,000 years. Over this period, paper notes grew in production to the point that their value rapidly depreciated and inflation soared. When the government needed money, it printed more paper. But printing more paper did not create more food, more cloth, more horses. It just created more paper. And so the paper became worth less and less and less, until it was worth almost nothing. This is inflation. And China's early experiment with paper money ended in economic collapse. It was a warning that would not be heeded for centuries. While China was experimenting with paper money, Europe was still using coins. But European commerce was growing. The Italian city-states, Venice, Florence, Genoa, were building vast trading empires. Merchants needed to move money across continents, and moving coins across continents was almost impossible. The solution came from an unexpected group, the Knights Templar. The Templars were a religious military order founded during the Crusades. They built a network of fortified castles and houses across Europe and the Holy Land, and they invented something remarkable. A crusader could deposit money at a Templar house in London, receive a letter of credit, a document certifying how much they had deposited, and then withdraw an equivalent amount at a Templar house in Jerusalem. No coins needed to cross the dangerous roads, just a piece of paper. This was the birth of modern banking. Over the following centuries, private banks in Florence and Venice developed this system further. They issued notes, they kept reserves, they lent money at interest. By the 17th century, Europe's first central banks were emerging. The Riksbank in Sweden in 1668, the Bank of England in 1694. But there was still a crucial link between paper money and precious metal. Paper notes were backed by gold or silver held in reserve. If you held a banknote, you could walk into the bank and exchange it for gold. This was the gold standard, and it gave people confidence in paper money, because paper by itself is worthless. But paper that represents gold, that can be exchanged for gold at any time, is as valuable as gold itself. The gold standard spread across the world in the 19th century. Britain adopted it. The United States adopted it. It created stability. It prevented governments from printing money recklessly, but it also created rigidity. During crises, when governments desperately needed to spend money they did not have, the gold standard was a cage. And in the 20th century, 2 world wars and the Great Depression would break that cage open forever. In 1971, the President of the United States, Richard Nixon, made an announcement that changed the global economy forever. He took the US dollar off the gold standard. America would no longer exchange dollars for gold. The dollar's value would no longer be tied to anything physical. The dollar would be worth whatever people believed it was worth. This is called fiat money. Fiat is a Latin word meaning let it be done, a decree, a declaration. Fiat money is money by decree. It has value because the government says it has value, because everyone agrees to treat it as if it has value. And today, every currency in the world is fiat money. The dollar in your pocket, the pound, the euro, the rupee, the yen, none of them are backed by gold. None of them have intrinsic value. They are valuable because we all agree they are valuable. Zimbabwe printed so much money in the 2000s that its currency became worthless. People carried wheelbarrows of cash to buy a loaf of bread. Germany in the 1920s experienced inflation that reached 11 million%. Workers were paid twice a day so they could spend their wages before they lost value by afternoon. The lesson of 5,000 years of monetary history is always the same. Money is trust. When trust is maintained, money works. When trust is destroyed, money becomes paper. Just paper. Let us take a moment and look at the journey we have traveled. From the farmer trading 2 chickens for a pair of sandals 50,000 years ago, to the merchant exchanging cowrie shells on the shores of ancient China, to the Lydian king stamping a lion's face on a piece of electrum, to the Song Dynasty official printing the world's first paper note, to the Knights Templar handing a crusader a letter of credit in London, to Richard Nixon cutting the last link between paper and gold, to the note in your wallet right now. Every step in this journey was driven by the same force, the need to make trade easier, the need for trust. Every morning you wake up and accept that the paper in your wallet is worth something, you are participating in one of the longest-running acts of collective belief in human history. You are trusting a system that millions of people before you trusted. And that trust, fragile, invisible, irreplaceable, is the foundation of the entire modern world. Thank you for watching Shadow Files. If this story moved you, subscribe for more new stories every week.